Hello guys, welcome to Slick Report. Please subscribe for more videos. Today, we are going to listen the stories which have been given the flair. Everyone sucks. So now, let's get into the story.
AITA for walking around the house in underwear, so my husband would ask his brother to stay in a hotel. I used to be close with my brother-in-law, but we aren't anymore due to how he treated my best friend. I don't hate him or anything, but I would prefer he wasn't staying in my home. When my husband told me he was coming to visit, I made it clear I didn't want him staying here, but my husband wouldn't budge and said his visit would be shorter if he was here, as they could work out what they were going to do about some family assets they were thinking about selling more quickly. Seeing him in my home was irritating me, especially since he's the type of person who loves making dumb sarcastic jokes constantly. I tried asking my husband to ask him to go stay in a hotel 2 days into his visit, but he again wouldn't budge, so I outright told my brother-in-law I didn't want him here, but that still wasn't enough to make him leave. I finally decided to walk around the house in my underwear because I knew he wouldn't be able to resist making a stupid comment, and it would annoy my husband enough to make him ask his brother to stay in a hotel, which is exactly what happened. After my husband told him to go, my brother-in-law accused me of thinking I was hot stuff who tried to lead my husband around by his dick, and made a point to tell me it would backfire if I kept this up. My husband also asked me if I wasn't going to continue the show during a fight, as I stopped doing it once his brother left, as my husband often has guests coming and going during the day, which made walking around our home in my underwear awkward. He was already upset with me, but the fact that I stopped immediately after his brother left seems to have upset him even more. AITA for changing the locks on my house after my fiancé made a key without my permission. I, 25F, own a beautiful 4-bedroom house. I bought it when I was 23, after letting my business partner take our shared assets in exchange for $600K. We owned a few properties together since we had bought our first place at 20 and 21 back when we were dating, and even though we didn't work out, we stayed in business together. I closed on my house a few months after my 23rd birthday. I had only been working part-time while I was managing our properties, so aside from my bed and some little things from my apartment, I stayed in my house for months, while it was basically empty. I had always wanted to be a pastry chef, and a local community college has a program that lets you get your certificate in almost anything for free with just 16 weeks of classes, and if you choose to continue afterward, your credits will roll over. That's where I met my fiancé James, M27. James was a chef at a high-end restaurant. He had been working since 16. He started as a busser and worked his way up. While he had a lot of experience, he wanted to have a degree to back it up. We hit it off pretty quickly. He even taught me how to drive, helped me develop recipes, and helped me pick out the perfect spot to put my bakery. He proposed to me in Jamaica on August 8, 2022. When we got back home, I moved in with him. I've been perfecting recipes in my house, as I had taken the time to make the kitchen to my liking. I tend to put my phone on D&D just to make sure I have no distractions. There have been a few times when I have missed calls from James and I see that it really bothers him, but it's not like I go at random times. I have a set schedule, and I rarely go off of it. About a week ago, I finished baking quite early and ended up taking a nap. My phone was still on D&D and I woke up to James banging on the door. He told me he had been calling me for hours. I told him I had forgotten to take my phone off D&D. He suggested that if he should have a key he could use for emergencies, or in case something like this happened again. I said no, because this is my safe space and I'm still adjusting to living with someone. The other day when I finished baking, I noticed it was raining, and I decided to call James, because I don't feel comfortable driving in the rain. He didn't call me when he got here. He knocked on the door, and when I opened it he complained about getting wet while waiting for me, and said he wouldn't have to wait if he had a key. I pointed out that he could have called me, and I would have just come to the car. He said that wasn't the point, and me not giving him a key was a slap in face. Yesterday I noticed he had one of those minute keys in his glove compartment. While looking for my lip gloss I left in his car, I immediately knew what he did and called my brother to help me change the locks. Last night at dinner, I let him know I found the key and told him it wouldn't be on any use as I had changed the locks. We argued and we haven't spoken since last night. AITA AITA for yelling at my boyfriend with ADHD for being unorganized. So me, F, and my BF are both 18. He has ADHD and is quite literally the least organized person you could imagine. When I say he is late for everything, I mean it. Hell, that boy would even be late to his own FCKN birthday party. When we need to be somewhere or our meeting, I'll have to tell him he needs to be there 20 to 30 minutes earlier than the actual time. His folders for college are a complete mess. He doesn't file anything, and around 2 out of 3,000 potentially important sheets and documents are just stored on the flyer in the spare room of his house. I worry how he'll cope in the real world with bills and documents, etc. Anyway, it was my mother's wedding last weekend. He was at mine the night before, but needed to go home in the morning to collect his suit. I told him to be at the venue for 11, no later, on the dot. Well, it had got to 11:30, and he'd still not shown up. My mother was literally about to walk down the aisle, and several people were asking me where he was. Just imagine how embarrassing this was. I didn't receive a text from him, no communication or anything. He ended up arriving at around 11:50, and he'd completely missed the marriage. As you can imagine, I was absolutely raging at him on the inside, but all the family were greeting him and making a fuss of how tall he'd gotten, etc. So I had to contain my anger and just smile on. No one else seemed to be bothered, which seriously irritated me. It's just selfish in my eyes. After the lunch and before the evening events, everyone had a bit of time in their hotel rooms. Hotel was on site. When we got back up to that room, I screamed at him. I just yelled about how annoyed and upset I was that he couldn't even turn up on time to a day so important to me. Unsurprisingly, there was no justifiable reason for his late arrival. Apparently he got distracted. He also looked very hot in his outfit, which irked me as I was less happy with how my dress and makeup turned out, and was smirking throughout this whole ordeal while lying on the bed seemingly unbothered, which really pissed me off and was the last straw. So, I said, why can't you just be normal? This is when his mood changed. He wasn't smirking now, he went all subdued and seemed upset. I regret saying this, it's not his fault he has ADHD, but he hurt my feelings by turning up late, so in that moment I wanted to hurt his. And I think I did. These last few days he's been downcast and toned down, not like his normal lively self at all. He hasn't spoken to me about the incident at all though, so I guess maybe he could be upset about something else? I spoke to Mom about the incident as it was her big day after all, and she said I overreacted massively and shouldn't have said what I did. She told me how she loves his ADHD and how it makes him unique, and now I feel terrible. But I also feel like my anger was justified as he needs to learn to respect people's time more, especially on an event so important. AITA for how I reacted. AITA for not allowing my boyfriend to come with me on a trip, since he was about to ask his parents to pay for all expenses. My 20F friends from uni and I have been planning to go on a trip next March since the beginning of this year. Since 2 of my friends are bringing their partners along with them, I've asked my boyfriend, 19M, if he wanted to come under the condition that he earn the money himself to cover his expenses, including plane tickets and accommodations, which had come around to be around 5,000 Canadian dollars. I made this request months ago because I knew he was going to ask his parents for the money to cover the expenses, which they had always given him. Like when his brother asked for $3,000 for a gaming setup, and when he asked for $2,000 so he could have a TV in his room. His family isn't super wealthy, but they are well-to-do, and his mom has tried to ask him to try and get a part-time job during school breaks, to which he has always said he'll try but ended up never getting one. I grew up in a household where we often had to get by and thus has worked/been working multiple part-time jobs since I was 16, and have been trying to urge him to get a job with his mother. A couple of days ago, he told me he wants to go on the trip with me, which shocked me as I questioned how he was going to raise $5,000 since we still have classes and semester break doesn't start till late February, and he told me he asked his parents, and they agreed to help pay for his expenses. I told him no, I would not be allowing him to go on the trip with me, and refused to share our itinerary document with him since I made it clear I didn't want his parents to pay for his expenses, and established that he would have to earn his keep. But he told me that this was something I should have zero say over since I was never in charge of how his parents' money. We had a fight over this, and he called me a controlling, manipulative freak before ranting to my friends' partners who are going on this trip with us. We're all part of the same friend group. They all agreed I was a little out of line and should have no say over how he raised the funds needed. I don't want to rant to my other friends about this since I don't want them to think badly of me or my boyfriend, but it really made me confused as I have no clue if I'm the one at fault here. AITA. AITA for not taking my BF on vacation with my kids and I. Okay, so here is the story. My husband passed away 7 years ago. It was a very hard time for me, especially with 3 small kids. I met my BF 6 years ago, we'll call him Mike. So after dating Mike for a short period of time, I gave him a key as it was easier for us as our schedules conflicted sometimes and he lived far away. That was never an invitation to move in, we never talked about that or anything like it. He came over one weekend and basically never left. Fast forward to now. My mom lives with me now, she helps me with the kids and I help her as she has RA really bad. Mike has never paid any bills. It was never discussed. He doesn't help with groceries and never offers to give me any money. He will sometimes if I ask because I'm behind on a bill or whatever. I asked him over a year ago to start giving me $300 a month. His youngest son turned 18 and he didn't have child support anymore. He agreed and I haven't seen a cent. Spring break this year I decided to take my kids in vacation. I've never done anything with them alone before. We've never been on vacation without a lot of family. So I decided this year I was taking my kids on vacation by myself. No Mike. In the past, I've paid for his vacation and his son's without asking for any money or payback. Mike is very upset. He says I'm being mean by not inviting him and his son on vacation with us. He says they are part of the family and should be able to go. He said he is willing to pay for his son and himself. I still said no. I want a vacation with just my kids and I. So, AITA. AITA for missing my Phil's funeral after my mill booked my husband first class but me economy. Me at 31 and my mill don't have a close relationship. She's civil towards me, but can be a bit passive-aggressive at times, and we tend to disagree oftentimes. We live in a different state. Phil passed away suddenly and Mill told me and my husband to come attend the funeral. She booked our tickets to fly to her state. But the issue started when my husband told me that we couldn't sit together in the plane because his mom had booked him a first-class ticket, while I got economy. I was flabbergasted by this. I tried asking him why but he urged me to suck it up, and we'll talk about it later. In that moment, that particular moment I felt so much humiliation and contempt. I felt like she was treating me as less than even in her hard times. I decided to not go and just go back home. My husband was shocked by my decision to go home, and tried to convince me to just go but I declined. He went alone and I ended up missing the funeral. He was livid just calling M3 and texting nasty things calling me petty and spoiled. He said that I should be grateful his mom paid for my ticket to begin with and said that she doesn't owe me a goddamn thing. I argued about how she could have just booked us both in economy if money was an issue, but he called me pathetic for thinking about it when his dad just died. He said it was cruel what I did and that his mom and family will never forget that I missed the funeral over ridiculous reasons. AITA for going home over this. EDA. One of the reasons I didn't settle for the economy ticket was because I wanted to sit next to my husband and support him. He sobbed the whole ride to the airport and I didn't want to leave his side. I was shocked when he told me we couldn't sit together and how he said it like he had no issue with it. AITA for leaving our son with my ex and telling him I didn't care when he said he was having an important conversation. During a party my parents were hosting, my toddler kept asking where his dad was. He was getting more and more irritable so I took him to find my ex. Once we found him, I left our son with him, even though my ex told me he was in the middle of an important conversation and he couldn't watch him. I told him I didn't care so he promised he would come and get him in 10 minutes once he was done. but I still left our son with him, and my brother who was there too. They found me about 30 minutes later, and both my brother and ex made a big deal about how I left our son with them when I knew they were busy. My son had clearly been crying, and they both got defensive when I asked them what they did to him. It turns out my son started crying because my ex wasn't paying attention to him, which meant they had to end their conversation so he could comfort him. My ex is claiming it's my fault for leaving our son there when I knew he was busy, and he accused me of being intentionally difficult. AITA. AITA for defending my cat after my meal was incredibly rude to him. My F24, BF, M25, and I recently moved out and got an apartment together. It's been great, and we even adopted an adorable kitten who's so sweet and cute. However, I do admit that his personality can be too much to handle sometimes. He's very affectionate and cuddly and loves to always be in people's company. He's also very vocal and curious, so he's always walking around looking for a new adventure. My BF's parents, F55 and M60, came to visit for the first time last week, and I made dinner, etc. They know we have a cat and they were okay with it. However, when they were over, my cat kept trying to hang out with them and rubbing against their legs, etc. And my mother-in-law aggressively pushed my cat away and then said that she was gonna go lock him in the bathroom to teach him a lesson. I immediately told her that she was acting like a child and that she needs to calm down, and it's just a cat who's being friendly, and he wasn't trying to annoy her. She said she wasn't staying if the cat was going to be running around. So I said, then go. It's my cat's house and she's the visitor, so I have no obligation to lock him in the bathroom because she wants to act like a toddler. Even if I were to put him in a separate room with his food, water, litter, etc., it wouldn't work because he wouldn't stop meowing, as I think he has separation anxiety. They ended up leaving, and now my BF is mad at me and saying that my reaction was uncalled for. Am I the asshole for defending my cat? AITA for asking my Mil to not give candy to my kids when they visit her. I'm F36, a mother of 3 kids. Alex, M10, Brittany F8 and Toby, M3. My husband and I have decided that our children should not eat candy or drinks with a lot of sugar or preservatives. We have let out families know about our decision. However, my mother-in-law insists that some candy or soda once in a while won't hurt them. I have found candy in my kids' pockets more than once when they visit her. My husband and I have spoke to her about it, but she won't give it up. So I told her that if she won't be able to respect our authority as parents, then the kids would not visit her again unless we can go with them. She made a scene about how I want to separate her from her grandkids, only for giving some candy to the kids. I told her that they're my kids before they're her grandkids. This argument has caused quite a big family drama. Most of my husband's family is now angry at us. Although my husband agrees with me, I still feel a little bit like an asshole for unintentionally putting his own family against him. So AITA, should I maybe look for another solution here? AITA for exposing my husband's job loss to his step-cousin. So my 31F husband, 32M, was laid off a couple of weeks ago, and his severance only consisted of 1 month worth of salary. He is an advertising guy who was making close to 6 figures one day, and now we risk losing our house that I was close to finishing the renovations for. Even though we saved, we are going to be behind on contractor bills, and my husband has been telling me that most of the money he gave me to run my own consignment business may need to be used to tie us over, which made me very anxious and upset since I have been leasing a space for 4 months already, and I assume business would be picking up soon if people buy used during recessions. I was previously a waitress and tried to contact my old restaurant, but they were not hiring. I have also sent out an application to another restaurant and have not heard back, so I feel like nobody is hiring in my area of expertise. My husband told me to give him time to figure something out and that he did not want the members of the extended family to know, at least not for the next month or so. My husband's mother and stepfather are both blue-collar, but his stepfather's late brother was very successful and his son is as well. My husband's step-cousin, 49M, owns many businesses, among which are a rehab facility and a moving and storage business. His rate of business has actually accelerated in recent months, and he has been giving me advice on my business as well. His step-cousin was judging a business competition last weekend, and I was volunteering for the organization that puts it together, so after the event we got to talking. I broke down and decided to tell him that my husband has been laid off, and so we were in a dire financial situation that meant I might have to close my shop. I asked him for advice. He told me he wouldn't tell anybody and gave me advice regarding marketing, and insisted on giving me the money to cover rent and a marketing budget/other bills. I was grateful for his help and used some of the money he gave me to pay down a few credit cards, and my husband ended up looking in my desk and finding out he wrote me a check. He was furious and called his step-cousin, and his step-cousin asked why he didn't just tell him that he was in trouble because he could have floated him a job. My husband and I got into a big fight as a result 2 days ago, and he said I basically announced his job loss to somebody he thought was pretentious and overbearing. He accused me of humiliating him and claims that his step-cousin told his mother and that she is a gossip. I maintain that I had no ill intent and was just trying to be realistic and ask for help. Now my husband has told his step-cousin off and tells me I need to get a job. AITA, I now feel bad for investing some of the money for my business. AITA for pleading with my husband's boss after he was sacked. My husband Michael and I have a 5-month baby and I'm still on maternity leave. She doesn't sleep very well and we're both exhausted. Michael came home today and said out of the blue he'd lost his job. It was totally shocking and frightening. He said they were laying people off. He'd known a while but hoped it wouldn't be him and he didn't want to worry me unnecessarily. Unfortunately, he said it had come down to him making a few mistakes recently because he was so tired, and they'd used it to avoid giving him a payoff. I told him I was going shopping and took the baby but instead went to his workplace, went to the reception and asked for the manager who I'd found out was the decision maker. He came to speak to me. I tried to get him to look at the baby and asked him to rethink his decision to lay off a new father. He seemed surprised by what I was saying and said he was sorry about the impact on Michael's family, but he had made the decision he felt was right and Michael had the right to appeal. He wouldn't really engage anymore and said he wasn't prepared to discuss it with a third party. Felt great, and I ended up being sarcastic to him. I went home and told Michael how I tried to help him, but that his boss was a robot. He went ballistic and told me I had no right to interfere. He then told me what had actually happened. He'd got behind with his work and claimed to have actually done reports and the like, which he hadn't, but signed for them having been done and putting them on timesheets to charge clients. He'd intended to do them later before anyone noticed. He'd also then forged his team leader's signature on audit documents and some other things to cover it up. This is all pretty bad. There'd been a big investigation, then he'd been fired for it. There were no layoffs. He just couldn't bring himself to tell me and was hoping to get something else quickly. He's mad with me for going to his boss and says this could harm his appeal or affect any reference. I can't see how he can possibly win an appeal, and I'm furious with him for lying to me. Not that this can make me feel any better, but AITA for letting my ex's sister stay with me. So I, 23F, and my current boyfriend, 28M, got into an argument recently over me allowing my ex's sister, 24F, to stay with us in our spare room while she finds a job and a new house to move into, having moved back home following a bitter breakup with her ex. He believes that it shouldn't be our duty to take care of her and let her into our house, but I had promised my ex that I would take care of his sister before he passed away, cancer 2 years ago, and want to keep that promise. I had told him as such and mentioned that she would be staying in our spare room, and that I didn't want to go back on what I promised my ex, no matter what. He told me I was too generous, and he was worried she would try and interject herself in our affairs and leech off us, and that I should just let her stay with someone else or family. The only family close to our state is her other brother, but they're NC, so not a possibility. I told him that if he didn't like the arrangement, then he was able to leave or stay at his mom's. She lives 5 miles away, but that my decision was final. He stated he thought I was putting her ahead of him and us, and trying too hard to appease somebody who wouldn't repay me. I told him this was personal to me, and that she is like family, and I wanted to do all I could to help her. So, AITA, edit, to clarify, because I'm awful at wording things, me and the ex, former partner, were together when he passed away.